Willow Creek Estates was always supposed to be Emily Harper's forever home. She and her husband, Mark, had lived there for more than 2 decades, hosting backyard barbecues, stringing fairy lights every Christmas, and waving to the neighbors, who took pride in their perfectly manicured lawns. It wasn't merely a neighborhood, it was a rhythm of life, in HOA meetings, in lawn inspections, and in the reliable thrum of sprinklers at dawn. Now, Emily was in her early 50s and alone in that same house. Mark had suddenly passed from a heart attack just 3 months earlier. One minute they were trying to figure out where they'd go on a trip for their 24th anniversary, and the next she was signing papers in the hospital with shaking hands. Grief washed over her in a wave, a silent, drowning sort. Each room had echoes of him, from his favorite mug by the sink to the old gardening gloves hanging by the door to his notes tacked on the fridge. On a gray morning, spirit weary and hands frozen, Emily drove to the HOA office. She required some sort of a clearance document for any future refinancing or sale of the house. The HOA receptionist had given her a manila folder with her name written on it. Inside, there were the standard forms and something else. An unsealed envelope. Her name was written across it in the familiar flowery scrawl, Mark's handwriting. She blinked, certain she must have been mistaken, but it was real. The envelope was tinged yellow and nestled between maintenance records and a pet leash policy newsletter. Her fingers shook as she opened it. There was one piece of paper inside, not a love letter, not a goodbye, a warning. If you're reading this, I'm through. I didn't want to worry you, but something is going on at the HOA, something that isn't kosher. I attempted to dig quietly, but I didn't know how much time I would have. Go to the filing room, the cupboard with green tape on its bottom drawer. Don't let them see you. Emily felt the room tilt. Her chest tightened. What kind of mess had Mark gotten himself into? She snapped the folder shut and walked away, never saying a word to the receptionist. At home, she sat in the reading chair Mark used to pay the bills, and her eyes darted over every word again. Her grief was beginning to mingle with something else. Curiosity, confusion, dread. She had to know more. The following day, Emily went to the HOA office, saying that she needed to double-check her paperwork. She brought cookies for the front desk, a strategy she'd picked up from Mark. When she was unobserved, she edged her way behind the screen into the rear of the store. The old filing cabinet was right where he said it was. Bottom drawer, beige, ragged green strip of tape. It creaked as she opened it. Dusty manila folders were piled within, some labeled internal, others worn by age. Her eyes scanned. Nothing jumped at her until she saw a file called Resignations, Private. She flipped it open. Inside were handwritten letters of resignation from past HOA board members, none of which had ever been publicly acknowledged. They said they were pressured to go along, not in agreement with financial practices, and one cryptic line in particular. What happened to Lot 46 was the last straw. Lot 46? Emily had never actually met the man who lived there. She couldn't, in fact, recall the last time she'd seen people in that house. Taking pictures of each on her phone, she silently closed the drawer and headed out the door, trembling not only from the anxiety but from the realization. Mark hadn't been paranoid. He had been on to something. And now, whatever it was hers to complete. Emily couldn't think about anything else in the days that ensued. She stopped watering the garden. She let mail pile up. She barely touched her meals. Her head swam with the words from those secret resignation letters, compliance pressure, financial practices, and most unsettling of all, Lot 46. The next morning, she took a long walk, found herself walking up to the mystery of Lot 46. It was at the end of a cul-de-sac, flanked by 2 weeping willows. You couldn't tell anything was wrong with the house from out there. Neat hedges, a swept porch, a seasonal wreath on the door. But something felt staged. Outside, there were no trash cans, no skid marks in the driveway, no hint of curtains drawn, of lights flickering at night. Emily had walked past this house for years, and she had never given a thought as to who lived in it. Now, she saw that she didn't. She asked her long-ago neighbor, Linda, about it later that evening. Linda smiled too quickly. "Oh, I think it's an Airbnb or something. Nobody permanent. You know how it is with people coming and going." But that didn't sit right. Short-term rentals were strictly against the HOA rules. Mark used to grumble about it whenever anyone suggested he sublet. When it grew dark, Emily struck. She stashed a flashlight in her coat pocket and returned to the location, Lot 46. The street was eerily quiet, and then she came to the house and caught her breath. The mailbox was overflowing, filled with weeks' worth of unopened letters, real estate flyers, and an outdated HOA warning notice hanging on for dear life to the side. She circled around the property. A side gate, fastened with a rusty chain, groaned beneath her grasp. She saw a small, slightly open basement window. Emily hesitated. This was trespassing, but so was covering up secrets in her husband's final months. She knelt down, raised the window up carefully, and slipped through. The basement stank of mold and dust. Her flashlight played along heaps of cardboard boxes, discarded furniture, and file cabinets, just like the ones in the HOA office. One box caught her eye. It was labeled Archive 2011-2015. She opened it and discovered minutes of meetings that were never published, complaints from the community to which no one ever followed up, and a spreadsheet, names, lot numbers, and something labeled Priority Tier. She scanned the list. Lot 22, Harper, Mark, and Emily. Tier 2, Lot 46, Bellamy, Greg, Tier 1, flagged. Greg Bellamy. That name was familiar. Mark had spoken of him once, a fiery ex-HOA board member who vanished 5 years ago, seemingly overnight. But it seemed he never started moving. She saw a date scrawled in red, October 3rd, finalized. The same day, Greg supposedly hightailed it out of town. Emily's hands trembled as she twisted off pictures of them all. Suddenly, footsteps echoed upstairs. She switched off the flashlight and ducked behind a shelf. The shadow fell over the stairwell. There was somebody else in the house. She waited. Long minutes passed. The footsteps retreated. A door slammed. Silence. Emily sneaked out the way she had come, heart pounding. Whatever had been done to Greg Bellamy had not been of his own doing. And now she was beginning to understand what looking too closely at the HOA's flawless appearance could cost you. Emily didn't sleep that night. She was sitting on the couch, her laptop open, with the enlarged photographs she'd made at Lot 46 on her screen. Every file she pored over exposed more than the last. Secret communications between board members, financial irregularities, forged signatures. But one posting made her sit up in astonished silence. She noticed a line from a scanned PDF of an old ledger. March 12th, rerouting of funds approved. Lot 22, buyout pending, MH. Lot 22, her home. MH, Mark Harper? The word buyout was buzzing in her head. Why would the HOA need to buy them out? And then she spotted another file, a draft letter to a law firm that confirmed the ousting of a board member because of a conflicting interest. The name at the bottom? Mark Harper. Emily's heart ached. Mark had sat on the HOA board, something she never knew, at least officially. The exact words were never said directly, except that he only helped them reorganize a few years back. Now it was finally starting to make a sick sort of sense. It wasn't just that he was mad at the HOA for nitpicking over paint colors or for fining him for weeds. He knew something. One thing is that he never told her about. Maybe to spare her. Or perhaps because it was the one thing that had cost him everything. Her memories drifted backward. This was 2 years ago, late at night. Mark had been late home. His shoulders were tight. Without saying too much, he poured himself a glass of water and parked himself on the kitchen counter. She remembered asking him whether everything was okay. He'd grinned and replied, "You ever feel like everyone else is in on something? But you?" She took him for a drama queen. maybe burned out from work. When he pulled her close that night, tucked her hair behind her ear and whispered, "If anything happens to me, don't trust the people from the neighborhood." Letitia was scared to death. Something happened to her father. She had laughed, teased him. The political thriller he had watched too many of. But here, sitting in the light of her laptop, Emily drew in a tight breath. She understood now that Mark had been attempting to warn her in his polite way. Her eyes fell back on the file. Buyout pending? Conflicting interests. Mark hadn't just posted and left the board. Presumably, he had attempted to stop something, perhaps a development deal, perhaps a financial scheme, and the others had turned on him. And it wasn't just that they had pushed him out of the HOA, they pushed him out of it all. Her grief transformed into something different now, something more than sadness, but fury. Mark had been smothered in secrets, and now she was the only one willing to drag them into the light. Instead, Emily dug further, lamenting not just Mark now, but the pattern of mendacity he had left clues to. The farther she dug, the more obvious it was. The HOA wasn't just cracking down on lawn bylaws or siding paint colors. It was a front, a cover story for a real estate shell game constructed on the back of forced turnover and insider deals. There were previous homeowner exit forms stamped with the same two letters, RK, Roger Kessler, the current HOA president. Most of the shapes seemed fine until she realized how many were marked non-compliant. Many had lines like, "Not up to code, resale recommended." Community standards left behind, buyout started, agreement silent, HOA to regain. Each of these houses had been resold in 30 days or less, nearly all of them to a single company, Southridge Property Holdings, LLC. And who were included on the Articles of Incorporation for Southridge? Roger Kessler. The HOA wasn't simply violating federal fair housing and disclosure laws. They were buying people out with pressure, citations, targeting enforcement, then flipping the homes through a shell company that could be traced back to the very people writing the rules. This wasn't just illegal, it was insidious. Mark must have known, and they knew it. That's why he left the board. That's why they wiped his history from the files. That's why Emily's house, Lot 22, was pending buyout. They wanted her gone too. But the plot twist she didn't see coming arrived. It was in the singed corner of a filing box from Mark's old storage unit, files she'd nearly thrown out after the funeral. A sealed, handwritten envelope. Yellowed slightly, but intact. No stamp, no recipient on the outside. Only the words, "Open when it doesn't make sense anymore." She sat down. Trembling hands broke the seal. Inside, a single page. It was from Mark. He wrote about the files, the names, the properties, how he had begun to discern patterns in how quickly houses were turning over, and how the fines bore little relation to the violations. He had created backups, on-location paper copies stashed in places they wouldn't look, and he penned one final line that brought tears to her eyes for the first time in days. "If you're reading this, you found them, which means you are stronger than I ever was. Sorry to leave you with this, but you're the one I trust, the only one to stop it." Her tears rained down on the letter, blotting ink, but not obliterating sense. Emily wasn't alone anymore. Mark had left a map, a voice, and a mission. Emily knew she couldn't lead with her HOA, not yet. If they could bury records of years past and drive people from their homes and never be held accountable, by no means would they stop one bereaved widow. But she came to them now with something they had not anticipated. The truth, supported by documents, Mark's letter, and a renewed sense of mission. Her first step was quiet. She copied everything: the phony citations, the bogus buyout forms, the registration of the shell company. Then she sent them anonymously in an email to a local investigative journalist named Dana Cole, whose work Mark had once admired. All Emily wrote was the next line in the email: "Follow the paper trail. Start with Southridge Holdings." As she waited, Her motion was subdued. She smiled through HOA meetings, nodded through policy updates, even voted on budgets for the neighborhood garden. And all the while, she was watching, listening, gathering whispers from others who looked vaguely unhappy. Like Mrs. Halston across the street, who once muttered, "They made us too, just like they're making you." 2 weeks later, the article made the front page. HOA power abuse, insider ripoff nets, 2 mailers flipped properties. It was explosive. It featured internal emails, Mark's backups, financial connections between Roger Kessler and the shell company, and testimonials from ex-homeowners who were just brave enough to talk on the record. The fallout was swift. The HOA board was disbanded as federal investigations followed. During last week's hearings, the subpoenas flew among city departments as Roger Kessler was put under house arrest. Emily's street was swarming with reporters and cameras, and at last, the sunlight that had been so sorely lacking. But it wasn't triumph Emily felt instantly. It was grief. Mark should have been here to witness it. He had started the fight. She had just finished it. And then, one quiet morning, she opened the last drawer of Mark A.'s desk, and she started to cry. The drawer she had never dared touch, not in all these months. It contained a USB stick that bore the label "For Her." And there were the videos of Mark demonstrating everything for her, step by step, in case she ever needed help. Love was in his voice, calm, reassuring. He had made it not only for justice, but for healing for her. "I knew you would find your way, Em. I just wanted to set up tracks." That night, Emily sat on the porch again, watching the neighborhood children play once more, as the people on her block smiled for real. The heavy silence had lifted. Ridgewood was out from under the shadow. Her home was safe, because of Mark, because of truth. And because love isn't over when you say goodbye.